This is my latest video entitled Carl Jung and Yoga Philosophy. It will be read to you by the narrator of my word program. And here we go. It'll take 1 second to switch over. Sorry about that, I wasn't quite prepped. And here it is.
Carl Jung and Yoga Philosophy. James H. Exum / Sakshi. Austin, Texas. Copyrighted August 6, 2026. All rights reserved. This is a discourse on psyche, symbol, and the ancient ascent of consciousness. So, let us begin with a clear mirror. Carl Gustav Jung was not a yogi in the traditional sense, nor was he a teacher of yoga, union, the disciplined joining of the individual consciousness with the deeper ground of being. He was a physician of the soul, a cartographer of the invisible interior, a man standing at the threshold between Western psychology and the ancient sciences of the East. Jung looked upon the yogic tradition not as an ornament, not as an exotic garment for the modern mind, but as a profound symbolic language of transformation. In the seminars later gathered as Kundalini Yoga, the yogic path concerned with the awakening of latent spiritual energy, Jung found a map of ascending consciousness, a sequence of inner stations by which the human being rises from instinct toward integration. The meeting of East and West. Jung's association with yoga philosophy was born from reverence and caution. He recognized that the East had preserved an inward science that the West had largely forgotten. The science of dhyana, meditation, sustained contemplative attention, prana, life force, vital energy, and samadhi, absorption, a state of unified consciousness. Yet he also warned that the Western seeker must not imitate forms without understanding the psychic soil from which those forms arise. For Jung, yoga was not merely bodily posture. Asana, posture, a stable bodily seat for practice, was only the visible edge of a greater inward discipline. Behind it stood pratyahara, withdrawal of the senses, turning attention inward, dharana, concentration, fixing the mind upon one point, and the long pilgrimage towards psychic wholeness. He saw in these terms a language parallel to his own vision of individuation. Individuation and the yogic ascent. Jung's central idea of individuation may be heard as a Western echo of an Eastern ascent. Individuation is the process by which the fragmented human being becomes whole, by which the ego bows before the self. In yogic language, this resembles the awakening of Kundalini, coiled spiritual energy, latent transformative power, rising through the chakras, energy centers, symbolic stations of consciousness toward fuller awareness. Jung did not reduce these symbols to physiology. He read them psychologically. Muladhara, root center, the foundation of embodied instinct, spoke to him of earth, survival, and unconscious rootedness. Svadhisthana, sacral center, the field of desire and fluidity, revealed the waters of emotion and impulse. Manipura, navel center, the fire of will and transformation, became the furnace where psychic energy begins to burn with purpose. Then came Anaheo, heart center, the unstruck sound and field of compassion, where the human being first becomes capable of seeing beyond mere appetite. Above it, Vishuddha, throat center, purification and expression, becomes the chamber of truthful speech. Ajna, brow center, insight and inner vision, opens the eye of symbolic perception. Finally, Sahasrara, crown center, thousand-petaled consciousness, suggests the mystery of union beyond ordinary ego identity. The self, the mandala, and the inner temple. Jung was especially drawn to the mandala, sacred circle, symbolic image of wholeness and ordered totality. He saw the mandala not merely as religious art, but as a spontaneous image of psychic integration. When the soul is scattered, the mandala appears as a secret architecture, a divine geometry, a quiet revelation that the center still holds. In this sense, Jung's self stands near the yogic intuition of Atman, true self, the innermost essence beyond ego. Yet Jung, being a psychologist, did not proclaim metaphysical certainty. He approached Atman, true self, the innermost essence beyond ego, as an image and experience of psychic totality. The yogi may speak of eternal reality. Jung speaks of an archetype that heals the divided personality. Jung's caution to the Western seeker. Here we must hear Jung carefully. He did not tell the West to become the East. He did not say that wisdom can be borrowed like a robe, worn without initiation, discipline, or cultural depth. He warned that the Western mind, shaped by history, Christianity, science, and individualism, must find its own authentic path into the depths. Therefore, to take up sadhana, spiritual practice, disciplined means of inner realization, without wisdom can become egoic inflation. To speak of moksha, liberation, freedom from ignorance and bondage, while fleeing one's own shadow is spiritual avoidance. To chant of Brahman, ultimate reality, the absolute ground of existence, while refusing the dark work of the unconscious is to decorate the ego with sacred vocabulary. The fire beneath the symbols. Jung's deepest association with yoga philosophy is therefore not found in imitation, but in correspondence. He saw that the ancient yogic masters had charted interior realities with astonishing precision. The journey from avidya, ignorance, misperception of reality, toward discernment, from bondage to freedom, from fragmentation to wholeness, mirrored the analytic journey from unconscious compulsion toward conscious integration. In the language of yoga, the seeker turns inward. In the language of Jung, the patient encounters the unconscious. In both, the work has not escaped but is deeply presented, not fantasy but confrontation, not mere peace but transformation. The serpent must rise, but first the earth must be honored. The light must dawn, but first the shadow must be seen. Dr. Jung at the gate of the inner East. Carl Jung was not a yogic philosopher in the orthodox sense. He was not a guru, not a renunciate, not a transmitter of lineage. He was a Western witness standing before the temple of the East, looking for the meanings beneath its symbols. He translated what he could into the language of psyche, archetype, image, and individuation. And so we may say, Jung's association with yoga philosophy was a meeting at the crossroads of soul and symbol. Yoga gave him a vision of ascending consciousness. Jung gave the West a psychological way to contemplate that ascent. Between them stands the ancient invitation: know thyself, descend into thy depth, awaken the sleeping fire, and return, not as a pseudo-saint, but as a whole human being. To support this discourse, Jung may be cited through several brief statements and source references that reveal his sustained interest in Eastern philosophy, meditation, and yoga. Union, the disciplined joining of the individual consciousness with the deeper ground of being as a science of inner transformation. In Yoga and the West, Jung writes, yoga practice is unthinkable and would also be ineffectual without the ideas on which it is based. This sentence is useful because it shows that Jung understood yoga not as a mere technique, but as a practice rooted in metaphysics, psychology, and disciplined inner vision. In his writings on Eastern religion, Jung observes that the East bases itself upon psychic reality, a phrase that reveals his fascination with traditions that take consciousness, experience, and inward realization as primary. This supports the claim that Jung viewed Eastern thought as a corrective to the West's excessive dependence on external, material explanations. Jung also states, the psyche is the one and only immediate experience, a formulation that allows yoga philosophy to be read through analytical psychology. The yogic path begins with the direct observation of consciousness, while Jung's psychology begins with the reality of psychic experience. In the psychology of Kundalini Yoga, Jung treats Kundalini, coiled spiritual energy, latent transformative power, and the chakras, energy centers, symbolic stations of consciousness, as symbolic images of psychic development. His commentary makes clear that he did not simply accept yogic anatomy literally. He interpreted it as a profound map of the psyche's movement from instinct toward consciousness. His lectures later published as Psychology of Yoga and Meditation further support this point. There Jung discusses dhyana, meditation, sustained contemplative attention, Patanjali's yogic discipline, Buddhist meditation, tantric symbolism, and the relationship between Eastern contemplation and Western methods such as active imagination. Jung's reflections on the mandala, sacred circle, also belong here. In his broader work on symbols of the self, he describes the mandala as an archetypal image of order and psychic integration. This connects Eastern sacred geometry with his own theory of individuation, the process by which the divided personality moves toward wholeness. In closing, a careful thesis may therefore be stated this way. Jung did not approach Eastern philosophy as a convert seeking to abandon the West. He approached it as a psychologist who recognized in yoga, union, the disciplined joining of the individual consciousness with the deeper ground of being, Kundalini, coiled spiritual energy, latent transformative power, dhyana, sustained contemplative attention, and the mandala, symbolic image of wholeness and ordered totality, not as religion, but as a symbolic science of the psyche's ascent toward integration.
And there we have it. I hope you enjoyed this one. Review it if you need to. It's not a very easy essay to comprehend and consume in one viewing. Also, if you have a chance, look at my other videos. This one should be number 101 in the production of my yoga philosophy discourses. So I'll say good night to you now, and as I always close, I'll use my standard script, so to speak. Be good to yourself, be good to others, and be good to strangers. And as always, don't let the troubles of this world get you down. Troubles come and go, and this episode too shall pass.